Not only do the social movement organizations adapt, often their members take advantage of new openings to not just pressure the state from the outside in the way civil society organizations usually do, but also from the inside. Around the world, leaders of pro-democracy organizations have joined the state following democratic breakthrough, the death of the old regime, to ensure that they pursue the sorts of policies that the social movement organizations expect. So again, let's look at the Chilean case of NGOs as opposed to the shantytown movements first, which we started again discussing a couple classes ago. So reminder, there was an active NGO community that really arose as a place for work for the many intellectuals who were excluded from their professions under Augusto Pinochet. Organizations that they formed range from intellectual groups and human rights organizations to other social, cultural, economic even, and religious ones. There were also a few NGOs that worked with the Pinochet government on what we call community development programs, like health programs, literacy programs, agricultural programs. Now, modernization suggests that these sorts of organizations, these developmental organizations, can indirectly create pressures for change. But they're also widely criticized as de facto supporting the government for this. And this is a constant danger of developmental NGOs. This is important. Unlike human rights organizations, unlike opposition political parties or organizations with no links at all to the state, like chess clubs and soccer teams and all that, and the independent media. These organizations, these developmental organizations, are not the ones who speak out against transgressions and abuses or remain aloof from the state. Instead, developmental organizations are actually working with the state as a partner to try to facilitate some sort of change. And again, going back to the modernization readings and lecture, what we know is that these sorts of changes, the increased literacy, increased health, increased socioeconomic status, can lead to new pressure groups that do demand for political change. That was political change, if you didn't hear that. So developmental organizations can run the risk, though, of supporting the state and actually strengthening it. And that's one of the critiques. So it goes back to the inverse U curve that we talked about way back in week 2 when we were talking about states. Non-Democrats can actually profit from increased development. They can actually take credit for increased development. And so these developmental NGOs are a risk. Now, all these various NGOs, including the intellectual ones and the developmental ones, provided key personnel to the first post-Pinochet administration, so after democratic breakthrough under President Aylwin. In some cases, this was classic payback, right? Former opposition political elites recognized that NGOs were key players in the political fight against the Pinochet government, the mobilization process against the Pinochet government. The government now supported some of these organizations, bringing them into the state in the hope that they would keep playing a role in further democratization, but a role that state leaders could harness and use for their own gain, unlike the Pinochet government, which couldn't harness them and was essentially overthrown thanks in part to them. So you had high-ranking staff and cabinet ministers, especially coming from organizations like the Economic Research Corporation for Latin America, Latin American Faculty of Social Sciences, the Center for Educational Research, the Center for Developmental Studies, Labor Economics Program. All of these NGOs were providing leaders at various levels. The same thing happened at the municipal level, where local governments brought NGOs in for their skills and their resources with regard to particular programs. And of course, all this sounds like a dream. NGOs can go in. They can directly influence policy in the new democracy. What could be better? But President Aylwin was soon criticized for trying to co-opt NGOs, trying to bring them under his own influence. And one way he did this was by incorporating these NGO leaders into the state, which de facto weakened the organizations that they left behind because their leaders, the most experienced leaders, were going off and leaving the organizations. Another way was by establishing an agency for international cooperation within a new Ministry of Planning and Cooperation. And so what this did is it helped to make to bring donor money from the state and from other states in through this one source to NGOs, which helped the state control who would get funding. All of this led to challenges for NGOs that were transitioning from anti-regime organizations to institutions charged with supporting an elected government. How do you maintain autonomy and grassroots connections while becoming a partner of the government?